So today I'm introducing Reverend Kyoku Tracey Walen, who's a resident here at Hokyoji. And she began practicing Buddhism in 1998 and was ordained in 2008 and given Dharma transmission by Byakuren Judith Ragir in 2015. She trained from 2008 to 2010 at Great Vow Zen Monastery in Oregon. Currently, she resides here at Hokyoji and supports the practice here, and also serves as a Zen teacher at Clouds and Water in a Saint Zen Center in St. Paul. So Kyoku, why don't I just turn it over to you and we'll get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Dokai. So I'd like to dedicate this talk to the Japanese people who have made it possible for all of us to discover and practice Buddhist teaching. What I want to talk about today is what's going on in our world and how do we respond. This is something I've really been wrestling with. I'm sure everybody here has and is doing the same thing. A friend texted me the news of the killing and torture in Israel and Gaza the first night we found out about it, and said, I am horrified. I am scared. Me too, I thought, and still do. And really wrestling, we all have a point at which something feels like it's in our face. So our world is in my face. War, natural disasters, tremendous suffering, so much hate and conflict. And I call out to Avalokiteshvara. How do I respond? What is the Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva, hearer of cries of the world? What advice do you have for us? So oftentimes when I get disturbed, phrases from my practice come, just keep practicing, follow the Eightfold Path, cultivate right action, loving kindness meditation. But these somehow don't have any juice in them for me. When I get stuck like this, I go to my bookshelf. And in this case, I don't know if you can see this on your screen. This is a book called Not Always So. It's an old book. The talks given by Suzuki. Let me see, there's more than one Suzuki Roshi. Shunryu Suzuki Roshi. And if you look at the face there, somehow that feels to me, it feels to me like, okay, this person will be helpful. I can tell. So I'm going to share some of his talks. And I hope that you'll feel a little more able, a little more resilient by the end of the talk. I feel more resilient having prepared the talk and read some of what he had to say in this book. It's very interesting when I do go to my bookshelf and I pull out something kind of going, how about that book? And then I'll look in the contents. And this book really made me want it to read it. And the section I'm going to be concentrating on and sharing is called Letters from Emptiness. And I thought, well, that's got to have something good in it. And some of the subtitles are Brown Rice is Just Right, The Zen of Going to the Restroom, Caring for the Soil, Everyday Life is Like a Movie. So I'm like, there's got to be something in here that will be helpful for me, that will enrich my imagination and enliven my heart. So I'm gonna go through this somewhat slowly, and at the end, hopefully, we'll have a lively conversation. So, what I'm going to read to you, well, first of all, after I decided, yep, this is the book I'm going to use, the first thing that came to me when I saw Letters from Emptiness, and I kind of breathed that sigh of frustration. I'm like, what's emptiness got to do with it? And I started channeling Tina Turner. What's love got to do with it? So I thought, well, that's a good question. What exactly is emptiness got to do with this? And I thought, well, it's at the core of the Buddhist practice. Surely there's something there to help us. But first I had to say to myself, what exactly is emptiness? So Suzuki says, we must understand emptiness through our experience, not our ideas. Well, that's not so new, but let's dig deeper. He says, you have an idea of emptiness and an idea of being, and you think that being and emptiness are opposites. But both of these are ideas of being. Emptiness is not like the idea you may have. You cannot reach a full understanding of emptiness with your thinking mind or with your feeling. That is why we practice Zen. So, frustration, it's like, okay, it's not that I don't believe you, I'm just still in frustration mode. So this is what Dogen is saying, I realized, in the Fukan Zazengi, which has always kind of frustrated and puzzled me as well, but I do my best. So what he's the way he says it is, do not judge true or false. Give up the operations of mind, intellect, and consciousness. Stop measuring with thoughts, ideas, and views. Think of not thinking. Not thinking. What kind of thinking is that? This is the essential art of Zazen. Suzuki Roshi says that too, and it's because our usual way of understanding something is with words and thoughts, and this is beyond those. And how do you talk about what's beyond what you usually are able to understand? So let's keep going. Although we have no actual written communication from the world of emptiness, we have hints about what is going on in that world. And that is, you might say, enlightenment. So I thought, well, that's sort of like my Zazen. I do Sesshin, and somewhere in there, something can come through that feels fresh and different. But it's not something I can really grasp, which tells me that, well, that's kind of a kind of enlightenment. It's not something I can usually chew up and digest, and yet it's vividly present. So where were we? Although we have no actual written communication from the world of emptiness, we have hints about what is going on in that world. And that is, you might say, enlightenment. When you see plum blossoms, hear a stone hitting bamboo, that is a letter from the world of emptiness. Well, those are kind of poetic words. But I thought, have I experienced what he's talking about? And I realized this happened to me a lot during the talk. Well, yeah. And I remembered a long time ago now, it was early fall, and I just left a meeting, and I was walking through the back to my car. And so I was not particularly thinking and not particularly not thinking. I was just walking, end of meeting. And I looked up and bam, one pink rose. I could still feel it. Just stopped me in my tracks. And it didn't have to have a name. It didn't have to have an emotion with a name. It just completely filled me with joy and amazement. There was nothing else about that. It was just that moment, bam. And I went, found my car, found my keys, and went on with the business of my day. But that was a vivid moment. That was a letter from enlightenment, I think, is what he's saying. Another time, sitting in a car at a stop sign near River Road. And I wasn't feeling, I was kind of thinking about things. I was sort of chewing on something, is my memory. And it was a summer day. Both windows on the car in the front were open. And all of a sudden, a seeded dandelion blossom wafted in the passenger side window and wafted out the driver's side window. Just a little wave from emptiness, glowing. It was just, it was ethereal. And again, I can feel that. It's a very vivid, not even so much sensations. It's a very body thing. It's not at all a mind thing. It's just, again, an experience of delight. But it's not always, of course, delight. I realized there was another experience I remember in Dokusan. And I was talking to the teacher, who was a visiting teacher, about the frustration I had with my family and my parents. And all of a sudden, the teacher leaned into me and very firmly and loudly said, "Your parents don't owe you anything." And literally, like knocked me back. I was actually, I remember just gasping and being essentially frozen with outrage. That was just so wrong. I can channel that from that memory. But really, before I even got to, that's just so wrong, I just had my mouth hanging open and my whole body was on fire. And he leaned in and he said, "Listen, I'm trying to help you." And somehow that was convincing. And tears came, and I bowed, and I left. And I didn't exactly go back and sit on my cushion. I mean, I did, but I was just this ball of kind of furious energy that wasn't exactly sure I was furious. So that Dokusan was a kind of letter from emptiness. And I realized, as I thought about it later, I thought, that's true. Owing isn't an idea. And I tried sharing it with a friend or two, and they both just went, "Excuse me, you can have your beliefs, but that's just not true. We owe our children everything," things like that. And I just thought, no, actually, I'm pretty sure that is an idea. That's an idea that I have, and that outrage is about me wanting it to be true. I had an experience going to a Alcoholics Anonymous for children of alcoholics. And I remember struggling with the first 3 steps as we were talking about it. And all of a sudden, one of the people in the group said to me, "Do you really want to spend your life energy going to a gas station that has no gas and that you know has no gas?" And I just was floored. It was like this message that said, this is how you're spending your life, being mad at your parents. And it just completely cleared up, I don't know, some messiness somehow or another. So I think all of us get these letters from emptiness. I think my stories aren't unique. Let me go on with what Suzuki Roshi says about letters from emptiness. All descriptions are limited expressions of the world of emptiness, yet we attach to them and think they are reality. My parents owe me something. This is a mistake. It's an idea of self. So our experience is empty of our ideas, our idea of being, our idea of big, our idea of small. To empty water from a cup does not mean to drink it up. To empty means to have direct, pure experience without relying on the form or color of being. As soon as we conceptualize something, it is already a dead experience. To empty is not the same as to deny. Usually, when we deny something, we want to replace it with something else. When I deny the blue cup, it means I want the white cup. When you argue and deny someone else's opinion, you are forcing your own opinion on another. But our way is not like that. Well, what is it like, you might be asking? No, that's what I asked. The thing itself is emptiness, but because you add something to it, you spoil the actual reality. So if we don't spoil things, that is to empty things. Now, maybe like me, you hear that and you go, well, exactly how does that look? So, of course, what does he say next? This is shikantaza, another thing that I don't feel like I can really define for myself or others. This means not to rely on any sense organ or the thinking mind and just receive the letter from the world of emptiness. When we see and accept things the way we are, we have no need to replace one thing with another. Really? Can I do that? How we empty the selfish part is to practice Zazen and become more accustomed to accepting things as it is. It's very particular about. Our idea is things as it is, emptiness, without any idea of good or bad. If we empty things, letting them be as it is, then things will work. Paint me doubting with a capital D. And it's like, I'd like to believe that. I'm trying to believe that. That's really what I'm about. When I ask Avalokiteshvara, how shall we respond? How shall I respond to this world I'm seeing? If we empty things, letting them be as it is, then things will work. I'm not sure I believe that. Then a memory came. I was 20 years ago, I was still married to my husband of approximately 20 years. And we had decided to separate. It was right around Thanksgiving. And 2 weeks later, my husband discovered that he needed to go into the hospital and have a triple bypass surgery. I, at the time, was living with friends. I had, in those 2 weeks, realized that I didn't want to go back to the marriage that I had, and I didn't think my husband did either. So I thought something's got to happen, or wasn't sure where to go with that because it was deeply disturbing. But when I heard that he had triple bypass surgery, I paused. I was like, well, we're separated. And then I thought, no, I need for myself to go and see how he's doing. And my mother-in-law was like, well, you're coming to visit him, aren't you? I was like, yes. And I was. And I recruited all of our mutual friends in hopes that their visiting could stand in for what my visiting couldn't offer, given how things were between us. But then it came time for him to go home, and he couldn't go home unless he had somebody to go home with him because he needed somebody to take care of him. So the hospital was like, well, who's going to be going home? My mother-in-law looked at me. She says, well, I'm not going to go home with him. And she said, you'll need to go home with him. And actually, I'm not even sure she said it that way. She just assumed. She just was kind of letting me know, okay, well, my stint's up and now he's yours to take care of. And I knew that he can't do this alone. But I realized I wasn't really willing to go home and be with him. It had not been fun being with him while he was in the hospital. Friends would come in and he'd be delightful and charming and funny and brave. And then he wanted me there. I was there. But then it was just like a whole different person after the friend would leave the hospital room. It was really very difficult. So I realized I don't want to be home in this marriage, in this house for 24 hours. But I couldn't imagine not going home with him. It's like, I have to go home with him. I can't just say, well, sorry, we're separated. And I couldn't imagine saying to him face to face, I'm not going home with you. I thought that's, I can't write him a letter. I have to be there and say it. This isn't a phone call thing. So I went, and weeping copiously, I said, I can't go home with you. And he looked at me and he said, you have to. You can't leave me out there to die. And there was something about that was terribly but distressing, but terribly clarifying. And so I didn't actually say anything at the time. It was just, there was no way to say a something. And we quieted it down. We breathed. We both cried. And after a short conversation, he went and found 2 people who worked with him at the YMCA to take care of him, one each for half the day. In the meantime, having walked out of that hospital room, I really felt like I would die. That all my friends in Sangha would abandon me. And some of that happened. But mostly, it didn't happen that way. There were actually people that said, "Oh, good for you." And it wasn't that they didn't love him. They just, I think, just had the wisdom to know that that's what I needed to do for me. About 2 weeks after that conversation and that solution had taken place, I was driving, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, came an epiphany. And I suddenly realized it's okay for both of us to have the feelings we have and the thoughts that we do. He can be as mad as he is. I can have the feelings I have and say them out loud. Wow. Wow. I thought we could have a whole different relationship. But he'd have to realize it too. I thought that might not be so easy. He probably won't. And we'll probably get divorced because he won't. Because until that comes to him in the same kind of pure way it came to me, he's not going to know it any more than I did before it came to me. And he didn't realize it, and we did divorce. 20 years later, here I am at Hokyoji, practicing my Zazen and being confused about how to respond. And I thought, oh, if we empty things, letting them be as they are, then things will work. And after thinking about this thing of separation and divorce, this memory, this epiphany, I thought, I have a whole different way of understanding if we empty things, of understanding, letting them be as it is, and understanding, then things will work. That's exactly what happened. But my thoughts and my feelings were all over the place. And 20 years later, I'm here. It's possible for me to be happy almost every day. And I have a rich life. I think that's things working. So I want to be able to have a discussion about this. But this matter of emptiness, as I read through the section on emptiness, is not so easy to grasp. It's actually ungraspable, and yet it's also possible for it to arise in a way that we know it. So I'm going to tell you another story from that section. It's the piece called "Brown Rice is Just Right." What does this have to do with emptiness, I thought, but here we go. When you eat brown rice, you have to chew it. And unless you chew it, it's difficult to swallow. So this reminds me right away of this divorce situation, difficult to swallow. When you chew it very well, your mouth becomes part of the kitchen, and actually the brown rice becomes more and more tasty. When we digest food completely, i.e., when we digest experience completely, what will become of us? What will become of it? It will be transformed, changing its chemical nature, and will permeate our whole body. In the process, it dies within our body. This organic process is called emptiness because it has no special form. It has some form, but that form is not permanent. While it is changing, it carries on our life energy. My idea, usually when I think about form changing, is that that means this body dies. But what this is pointing to clearly is that moment changes. The organic process is called emptiness because it has no special form. It has some form, but that form is not permanent. While it is changing, it carries our life energy. Emptiness can be understood when you are perfectly involved in chewing rice. This is actual emptiness. Chewing rice, chewing brown rice. The most important part is to establish yourself in a true sense without establishing yourself on delusion. And yet we cannot live or practice without delusion. Delusion is necessary, but not something on which you can establish yourself. It is like a stepladder. Without it, you cannot climb up, but you don't stay on the stepladder. Stick with yourself, not with delusion. Don't run away. Stick with me. Don't run away, stick with me. It's him speaking as in his teacher voice. And he says, I do not mean stick to me. and that's an important, subtle understanding. Whatever I think me is, he's instructing us not to stick to that idea of who we are. It's an idea. It's not a right, wrong thing. We shouldn't be disappointed with a bad teacher or with a bad student. You know, if a bad student and a bad teacher strive for the truth, something real will be established. That is our Zazen. We must continue to practice Zazen and continue to chew brown rice. Eventually, we'll accomplish something. So I'll end in that way with this sentence that I found so helpful and kind of freeing. If we empty things, letting them be as it is, then things will work. So, how are you doing with everything that's happening in the world? And what does the Avalokita spirit in you say about what is an appropriate response? And how are you thinking and feeling about this teaching of Suzuki Roshi's? Nothing big. Just connecting.
I believe Janet has her hand up.
Well, do not hesitate. Speak right up.
Thank you, Kyoku. That was beautiful, and I appreciate you sharing so generously and so fully. I'm at Hokyoji, visiting this weekend to write my thesis on normalizing conversations around death, loss, and grief for my Upaya chaplaincy program. And since many of you have been here, I was walking along the trail yesterday, not too far from the yurt, and I saw a wing flash, and I thought maybe it was a hawk who had landed, and I just kind of slowly came up to it, and it was a beautiful barred owl that was on the ground. And I didn't know what was happening to it. It clearly was injured or maybe trapping prey. I thought it, I've read some about it, but it just turned its head and looked up at me, but didn't move. It just looked me straight in the eye. And yeah, I just didn't know what to do with it. And I waited for a little bit, but it clearly didn't want me in its space. So I backed off. And long story short, I made a number of phone calls to the Minnesota Raptors Center, who sent me to a place in Iowa, who sent me to an individual, who sent me to a DNR conservation officer who I spoke to. Nobody was within 3 hours away. And they all basically said, it's probably going to die. So I went back up to visit it later, and it indeed had kind of turned over on its side and its legs were extended. And I just am thinking about what you said, that emptiness can't be thought or felt. You have to actually experience it. And to think that I'm here writing about death and loss and grief and how we need to normalize it, and then to see this happening in front of me and just feeling the need to do something, but recognizing that letting it go and letting what naturally happens, it was so profound. And I went back up early this morning and it's gone, completely gone. Like there's a little tuft of feather there, but that's it. And I realized that a coyote or somebody was able to feed. But yeah, I don't know. It just was this kind of circle of life. And I just really resonated what you said about, not feeling like we need to fix things. And just sometimes we just have to be with them. We can't change that situation. So yeah, thank you for that. I just wanted to share that. Thank you so much for your talk.
Thank you so much. We would have missed that owl without you. Thank you. Thank you. Somebody else?
Your little story, Janet, got around Hokyoji a little bit with your owl. It came to me via Dozen. Like, what do we do? It's like, well, a lot of things die out here all the time, and so it's just not like an unusual situation. So none of us knew what to do, except just let it go. And it was interesting that you said there's no remnant of the body this morning. Sometimes I don't like to advertise this, but sometimes I have to kill mice in my residence, and I give them a toss into the woods and know that something's going to regenerate from their life. So it's like I don't feel good about killing, but at all. But the cycle of life just continues to go around without any kind of personal involvement. And it's striking when we read history of wars, and here and there, thousands, millions, people have died through fighting with each other, and it's just going to continue, maybe. So it's like, how do we respond to that? So it's just a question. I'm not sure there's any answers, but thank you for sharing. Thank you.
I noticed a quote that Carl shared. He can't participate technically the same way the rest of us do, but Dokai, can you open up your chat box and read what he had to say?
Oh, okay. Let's see if I can manage that one. Okay. Carl Holtman to everyone. What is the quote? Complete and utter cooperation with the unavoidable.
I like that. Short and to the point. All right. Who else? I
Is that
know that.
for you, Kyoku? I'm not sure what.
Am I what?
I don't know. His question is, what is the quote? Complete.
Oh, I think that is the quote. Complete. He
Oh,
was thinking out loud, I think.
okay. No problem. Okay.
Can you read it again? I want to write it down. Complete.
Number
Some-
one, what is the quote? Question mark. Space, complete and utter cooperation with the unavoidable, period.
That'll send me to the cushion.
Okay.
Who else? Oh, good. Ryushin.
So I'm participating in this class with Kikan at Compassionate Ocean on Karma, and it's all from Katagiri Roshi transcripts. So Katagiri Roshi talks about karma as one of the kind of defensive mechanisms or thinking mechanisms for dealing with what's going to happen when we die, because people want to know, if I do good things, will I go to a good place? If I do bad things, will I go to a bad place? But his kind of the theme that Katagiri often strikes is we just don't know. And basically, he comes to the point that when it comes to death, we just don't know what to think. But this is an important thing, that when we get to a point where we just don't know what to think. So obviously, the conflict in the Middle East is a lot about ideas, people holding on to ideas very strongly. So I've been reading The Atlantic, and the Atlantic has really good articles about the conflict. And one of the first articles said that this is the growth of Hamas is basically because Israel just tried to ignore it, just tried to compartmentalize it and just push it away and not pay attention. And this is the result of not paying attention, not facing things. Then one article said Hamas was just so surprised. This was from a military person, so surprised at the success of their raid that they didn't really have a step two. They didn't have a second idea of what to do because they weren't expecting this much success. But then almost immediately there was an article saying that Israel is stepping into a trap set by Hamas of overreacting and making their own atrocities, which is kind of apparent in some ways. And so it's like, this is just ideas, all these analysts. And it's like, okay, yeah, both ideas can be true at the same time. And at the same time, there's things going on that shouldn't be about ideas at all. That this is humanities we're dealing with. So,
Yeah. I remember it occurring to me that I wanted to get rid of atomic bombs, but I didn't want to get rid of atoms. So this conundrum comes up for us. My favorite quote about death and karma comes from a book I can't remember the title of, but it's a Tibetan teacher who says, let me make sure that I get this. He says, the best way to find out what happens when we die isn't popular. He's right about that. Although one of my dearest experiences, a friend of mine that died, and I wasn't there when this happened, but his last alive interaction was in a hospital, having come out of what seemed to be a coma, with all of his family members around. And all of a sudden, he woke up and he looked at them all, and he always had a dry sense of humor. But he said, it's a wonderful world of yes. So that kind of goes along with what Carl's quote said, utter cooperation with the unavoidable. Yes. Somebody else wants to share.
Yes. Thank you, Kyoku. Yeah, I've got another bird story here. It's a theme, maybe. Where I practice, there are lots of big windows, and they're right above all the flowers that the birds like to feed on. And when sitting there, there's often a big thump because the birds who are feeding fly off right into the windows. And that happened yesterday when John and I were there sitting and watched this robin die. And I've watched other birds die there. And of course, I want to fix it. I don't want to leave it be, this situation. Yet, yeah, I mean, what I want to do is go plaster all sorts of bird stickers, do something to stop this from happening, but it's not my place. And, you know, others may not agree in having a lot of stickers on the windows. And so there is this letting it be aspect, a small little situation, unlike in the Middle East right now, but even that, it's really hard to just let it be. Know that I'm not going to save the birds, perhaps. Knowing that I'm not going to stop what's happening in the Middle East. The heart still breaks. In emptiness, the heart still breaks. In letting go, the heart still breaks. And there's a letting go and letting that happen too. So
we all come into the world screaming.
yes. Yeah.
We have to really, I think, just remember that piece about letting them be as they are.
Yeah.
And realizing that works. If there's even a need for that conclusion, but it feels like it. We all want it to work.
Yeah.
GD Kennedy, I'm hoping that you have something you might want to share, some thoughts.
You're calling me out, Kyoku. Thank you so much for the invitation in this very important gathering. I guess for me, I'm really resonating with the last person's. I'm sorry, I don't know your first name. What you said about the heart still breaks in emptiness. I can just really, it's an embodied experience, because what is an appropriate response when the heart is breaking? Because it's not just an individual response, it's a collective response. We're all feeling it. And how do we respond? My Dharma position is one of a person who's in the US, who's witnessing the horror in cruelty across the ocean. So what is my Dharma position? Because I'm not in the midst of the war, and yet I feel it. I'm being impacted. So I think for me, I go back to Bernie Glassman, Roshi, where I bear witness. I face what's happening, and I wait. I don't linger. For me, waiting is different than lingering. I wait for something to emerge within me to be able to respond, not from hate or my anger, but from wisdom and compassion. So I'm very grateful for your talk, Kyoku. And I'm grateful for the compassion for the birds, for the trees, for Hokyoji, for our karma, because to me that is the antidote. And what the action looks like, I don't know. But I do know what it doesn't look like for me. So thank you, Kyoku.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. I think Dokai is waiting. We can't hear you, Dokai, because you're on mute.
What do you think about me? I was just working on all these pins, like pinning people here and there when they're speaking. But in any event, I wanted to bring up two things. Number one is I'm going to pin Ms. Steinbeck again here for a second. Add pin. Now, can you see that poster in the back behind Ms. Steinbeck's head? Now, that's a very famous poster for Hokyoji. I don't mean to like change the mood here, but oh, there she's even going to zoom in on it. So that's a poster that was created for Hokyoji about 40 years ago as a fundraiser. And we don't have too many of those posters around. And I see the crinkle in the middle of the poster. Okay, so and I'm kind of looking for a totally complete flat poster to, but we fold them all up, and I'd like to make a framed poster of one of those things sometime here at Hokyoji. So that's just something. I mean, it goes back to a time, when Hokyoji was just in its very beginnings phases, and there were ideas about what to create, and it didn't go that way. When we sent out the big mailing, we closed down the Zendo for 3 days and sent out 25,000 of these posters, whatever, and the goal was to raise about $400,000, and I think we raised about 22,000. So it's like the story I remember is Katagiri went up to his room and we didn't see him for 3 days, after the fundraiser. So anyway, I'm just bringing that up, and then I'm going to shift to. I like having all this control. I can pin you guys and make you go away and remove. And now I'm going to bring back. Where'd you go, Mr. Dozen? I'm looking for you. There you are. And I'm going to pin Mr. Dozen here, and then I'm going to add Oh, yeah, that. Oh, now, yeah, I can't because the panel's in the way. What I noticed, Dozen, is you have a cat in your window. You have a cat. I can't see it because of the panel, but it's, I don't know. Shane, move Dozen and shift your camera so we can see that cat in your window. Did you do that because birds were bumping into your window?
Well, it could function as a bird scarecrow of sorts, but it's a stand-in for an animal that I wish that we had here at Hokyoji.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. Let's keep that in mind, folks. I thought I have the same situation in my room where I just hear these horrendous crashes into my window. I think the birds, I have windows on three sides, so I think they can fly through like it's a tunnel, and I don't know how many birds have died hitting my window. So I thought you had that cat up there, and some people put an owl or something to keep the birds from going through. So yeah, I know we have tremendous challenges facing us in this world, but sometimes we just have to come back to the cats and the windows and those posters to remind us where we are and where we need to go to negotiate this world. Thank you very much for your talk, Kyoku. I'm certainly, we have, I don't know, oh, we don't have too much time, only one more minute. So maybe we should close up.
But first I'm sorry.
Go ahead, somebody, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I just want to tell you that I've got several of those posters and I will send you one, but it's folded.
Yeah,
It's folded for many years.
Okay, I'll see if I can. I got a new iron the other day, so I'll see if I can. And a new ironing board cover. So I'll see if I can smooth it out and we can frame it somewhere. We need to have that frame somewhere here at Hokyoji. So okay, any other comments for Kyoku before we
Kim might have one.
Kim, do you no?
No, he says no.
Just raising your hands in gasho like he always does. Like,
thank you very much, everybody, for the comments you did offer. I found them very enriching, and I'm imagining others did too.
okay, then I think we'll close then for today. Thank you so much, Kyoku, for offering the talk today. I know it's we've been facing some difficult circumstances lately. So we have a just sitting retreat beginning on Tuesday, and I don't know if that retreat is still open or not. But you might. And then we have a special memorial for a very special practitioner here associated with Hokyoji. His name is Keiyu Ken Ford. That's going to be on October 29th. It's going to be at that's 2 weeks from today. And instead of a Dharma talk, we're having a memorial service for Ken Ford that day. And we have indications that his wife, Barbara, and his daughter, Sarah, are going to be in attendance. And we're going to have an ash spreading ceremony of some sort that will also be associated with that. So if you want to participate personally, you can come the night before. Just give us a heads up that that's what you'd like to do. Or we'll have a Zoom availability for that ceremony as well. Probably not for the ashes spreading, but for the Zendo part. On November 9th, we have a retreat being led by Raisei Mark Anderson, calling Naturally Awake. And then on the November 16th, retreat led by GD, who is present in our assembly right now, practicing the way in this very moment. So you can contact us if you're interested in attending that retreat. And finally, for the rest in December, we have a Rohatsu retreat from December 2nd to December 9th or 10th. I don't know. Saturday to Saturday. And Kyoku, our speaker today, is leading that in conjunction with Myo-O, have a mass share. Finally, on January 29th, the Hokyoji winter practice period begins for 3 weeks. It's going to be, the first 2 weeks are going to be co-led by GD and myself on the Diamond Sutra. And the last week is we're still pending confirmation on a guest speaker for the last session. So that's it until mid-February of next year. Those are our events. We still have a pretty busy schedule going on. We're always supported by your generosity, so please consider donation if you're so inclined to do so. With that in mind, why don't we close with the 4 vows? Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. My last little thing. Thank you all.